Hello guys, welcome to part 1 of True SMC from A to Z 2026 edition, and without further ado, let's dive in. Alright, so first let's have a quick recap of how these bullish and bearish candles gets printed on the charts. In a bullish candle, price opens, heads lower, rejects the lower prices all the way to the highest price reached on that period, then reverses back to where it eventually closes. And this explains why the OLHC. And on the other hand, on a bearish candle, it's actually the opposite. Price opens, heads higher, rejects the higher prices all the way to the lowest price reached, and then reverses back to where it eventually closes. And that explains the reason OHLC. OHLC. Okay, so now that we have a full grasp of how these candles are created, let's get to learn about the bullish or the candlestick based uptrends and the candlestick based downtrend. Okay, so in a candlestick based uptrend, price breaks past the high of the previous bullish candle while protecting its low. Price breaking past the previous bullish candle high while protecting the low. And this continues, or the uptrend continues, until when price takes out the low of the previous bullish candle before extending towards the high. And that's the end of the bullish candle and the start of a valid pullback. And the opposite is true in a candlestick based downtrend, where price breaks past the low of the previous bearish candle while protecting the high. Price breaks past the low of the previous bearish candle while protecting its high. And the candlestick based downtrend continues until price breaks past the high of this bearish candle instead of the low or before the low. This is the start of a valid pullback or the end of that candlestick based downtrend. Okay, so with that said, now let's get over to the different scenarios of identifying a valid pullback in either a bullish scenario and in a bearish scenario. Okay, so these are bullish scenarios, but whatever we showcase here will be applicable or is true in a bearish scenario. Alright, so onto this first scenario, we can clearly see that price made a break past the previous bullish candle high while protecting this low, meaning what? A candlestick based uptrend. Now onto this next candle, this bearish candle made a break past the low of this candle, meaning the end of that candlestick based uptrend and the start of a valid pullback. And now the pullback becomes complete when price now reverses back and breaks past that high of that bullish candle that we started the pullback by taking its low. And exactly right here we can clearly see that the next candle was bullish and eventually made a break past that candle high, and that's what we call a valid pullback in a bullish scenario or a bullish valid pullback. And we can clearly see that here it was a break by a wick, so it doesn't matter. It can be by a break by a body and by multiple candles. And also the color of that candle, it also doesn't matter. It can be a bullish candle or a bearish candle. Okay, so onto this next scenario, we can clearly see that price made a break past that high while protecting this low, meaning up, meaning a candlestick based uptrend. And now on this next candle, we can clearly see that price made a break past this low before now making a break past this high. So this means what? Also a valid pullback. The break can be by a wick or by a body closure. It doesn't matter. And also the candle that takes out the low of the previous bullish candle, it can either be bullish or bearish. It actually doesn't matter. And you can clearly see after that price continued with this candlestick based uptrend. So where was the pause? This here was the pause, and this pause is what we call a bullish valid pullback. Okay, so onto this scenario again, you can clearly see a break past the previous candle high while protecting the low. On this candle, we can clearly see this here is an insider bar. We don't pay much attention to this. we only focus with the mother candle. And now this other bearish candle took the low of this bullish candle, confirming the start of the valid pullback. And I said the pullback ends when price reverses back and makes a break past that high of that pullback, continuing with its prevailing trend. So this is what we call now a complete valid pullback. And in this case, since it's a bullish scenario, it will be, of course, a bullish valid pullback. Okay, so onto this other scenario, the fourth scenario, we can clearly see a break past the previous bullish candle high while its low is protected. Onto the next bullish candle, we can clearly see a break past the high of this bullish candle while the low is protected. So what does this mean? This means that this here is not a valid pullback, even though we can clearly see that this candle here, we can clearly see that this bullish candle took the low of this bearish candle in between here, but we don't pay much attention of these insider bars. We only focus with the mother candle. So this would have been a valid pullback if this bullish candle took the low of the previous bullish candle before continuing higher past breaking this previous bullish candle high. In that case, that would have been a valid bullish pullback. But in this case, this is not a valid pullback because we can clearly see that the mother candle, the low is protected. So this means that this one here is an invalid pullback, or rather just a candlestick based uptrend. So onto this next scenario, we can clearly see a break past the high while the low is protected. Onto this next candle, we can clearly see that this candle and this red candle, the highs are pretty much similar. So in this case, this means that this candle here is not an insider bar. So we'll now be shifting focus to this other candle. And we can clearly see that this bearish candle took the low of this bearish candle, I mean the previous candle, before price made a break past this high. So this means what? The start of the pullback was here, and then price reversed back and broke past the high of this previous candle, or the candle that price took the low and started the valid pullback. And if that happens, then this means that this here is a valid pullback. And after that, you can clearly see price is continuing with its prevailing trend, that is the candlestick based uptrend. And now the last scenario, exactly right here, a break past the previous bullish candle high while the low is protected. Again, here we can clearly see a break past the previous bullish candle high while the low is protected. Like I said, anything in between here, we don't pay much attention, and this is just a normal candlestick based uptrend, and this is not any valid pullback, not unless price made a break past this previous bullish candle low. This here is not a valid pullback, but rather an invalid pullback or just a candlestick based uptrend. And so guys, just like I said, the same is true in a bearish scenario. Like all the concepts here, the one that we have discussed in these bullish scenarios will be similar in a bearish scenarios. And so guys, let's finish up with getting things practical, and so let's get into the real charts. Okay, so onto this chart, we can clearly see price making breaks past the high while protecting the low. Again, here on the next candle, price made a break while this low is protected. Onto this candle, price made a break while this low is protected. Now onto this candle, we can clearly see that price made a break past the low before price reversed back, making a break past this high. So what does this mean? This means that this here is a valid pullback. And yeah, so this one here is a valid pullback, with that one there being the high of that valid pullback, and this one here being the low of that valid pullback. And so after the break, we are back to the candlestick based uptrend. We can clearly see a break, the low is protected. Another break here, the low is protected. Another break, the low is protected. Another break. So this is a candlestick based uptrend, and it continues until price takes the previous bullish candle low. So exactly right here, price takes the high while the low is protected until now price takes the low of this candle, and now that is the start of that valid pullback, and of course the end of that candlestick based uptrend. And then after this candle, you can clearly see price reversed and made a break past this high. So what does that mean? This means that we have just made a valid pullback, a complete valid pullback. And yeah, after that, after the break past the high, we are back to the candlestick based uptrend. And so we can clearly see the highs, can clearly see a break past the high while the low is protected here. We can clearly see now after that this bearish candle made a break past this low, and after that we just wait until price reverses back and makes a break past that high to confirm that complete pullback, and we continue with the prevailing trend. And in that case we can clearly see that this one here is the high, this one here is the low, and yeah, that's how we are marking the valid pullbacks. It's pretty much simple. So you can clearly see that's a valid pullback. So you can clearly see the valid pullbacks. And in a bearish scenario, if I am to mark in a bearish scenario, we can clearly see this. Yep, so yeah, that's a bear. We can clearly see that all of these were just bearish scenarios until price made a break past that. And now we changed to the bullish scenario again. So we can clearly see here valid pullback. So this here is a bullish scenario. So valid bullish pullback. Now back to bearish. You can clearly see exactly right here, and that's where now price is currently. So guys, that's how we should mark, or that's how we mark these valid pullbacks. And this right now, it may not sound as an important part, but it's a very core part in true SMC. And without knowing valid pullback identification, then going forward you might find it difficult. Alright guys, so I will end the video here, and I want to believe that you have a full grasp of this. Watch and rewatch this video, practice on how to identify these valid pullbacks, and on the next part, that is part 2, we'll be getting into market structure mapping, that is the true SMC market structure mapping. And this concept that we have just learned here, that is valid pullback identification, will be applicable on the next part.